I had told people all year, I'd pushed this off, and I had said, well, I'm sticking with the Washington Capitals over the Colorado Avalanche as my prediction for the Stanley Cup. That's how it would end up in the finals. So now that we're in this state of flux, and there's a lot of doom and gloom going around of that's it, everything's done, no more sports ever. It's just okay, all right. I'm not that much of a pessimist, honestly. So while we're in this state, we have to look at how they're going to run this should they find a way to resume things. And it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky because you have to make sure that the players are insulated. So first off, you have to make sure the players are healthy. And then once you've ascertained that they're healthy, you have to keep them insulated. And that, again, like I said, really, really tricky thing to do. I think it's possible, but considering all the travel and everything, they might have to get creative. But let's just assume, just for this video's sake, that we say, all right, regular season's done. What we're going to do is we're going to say the top 10 teams in each conference have a chance at the Stanley Cup. Top 10 in each conference. But we're going to have a play-in. So this is something they've talked about before, where the number one wild card faces, the team second below the playoff line. And I didn't mess with this. Now I could have gone with winning percentage and then things might end up different. But you know what? I'm just going to go with the straight standings because I don't think it's going to affect necessarily who ends up winning it. So right now we would have Carolina, who are the number one wild card, against the New York Rangers, who are below the playoff line. Columbus, number 2 wild card, versus the Islanders, who are below the playoff line as we traditionally know it. Winnipeg versus Minnesota. And Nashville would have home ice against Vancouver. Nashville has 28 regulation wins. Vancouver has 27. The Nashville Predators, by that standing, would beat out the Vancouver Canucks right now. That is your first tiebreaker's regulation wins. None of the rest of it matters. So with that in mind, we're going to go through and I'm going to figure this out. These are the teams waiting. These are the teams that are all in, and these are the ones waiting for a wild card opponent. I can actually move these around a little bit. Yeah. I always qualify this as kind of like playing Friendly Giant when I start doing this stuff. It's just, anyways. It's a dated reference. I know anybody under the age of 30, and I would think anybody outside of Canada is going to be like, the who? It doesn't matter. And no, I'm not talking about Big Friendly Giant either. There's a kid's show in Canada in the 70s. Anyways, he'd move around little tiny furniture. So you'd sit down by the fire. It's kind of reassuring. We could probably use that right now, right? Anyways, okay, so we have Carolina against the Rangers. So this would be a best of 3. Three. Best of 3, Carolina and the Rangers. And I don't see a way that the Rangers don't win this. I don't. So now the Rangers being a 10th rated team, okay, overall in the conference, means they would be the second wild card. That would lead to the New York Rangers getting into the playoffs against the Boston Bruins. So Carolina, I think, would lose a best of 3 against the Carolina Hurricanes. No offense to the Hurricanes, but the Rangers have been playing fantastic hockey. Columbus versus the Islanders. Now this one's weird because Columbus wasn't playing well going into this pause, but they're going to be healthier coming out the other side than they were going in. So that does kind of change the picture, doesn't it? Now the Islanders, on the other hand, for them it's just been, I don't know, there's something off with their game, and it feels more like the Islanders have some issues going on here that are related to more than just like an injury related thing. I know Pelech being out has hurt them, but it feels like there's more going on there. I think in a best of 3 situation, I think Columbus would win that. So Columbus would earn a chance to get into the playoffs and play against the Washington Capitals. Everybody following along so far? Yeah, that's right. Everybody will just skip to the end. Winnipeg against Minnesota, best of 3. This would be an amazing series because in my house, of course, my wife, that's her 2 favorite teams, so she'd have a chance to watch them against each other again. They played each other in recent years, and I think Winnipeg would win that. I think the number 1 wild card, Winnipeg, would win that, and that would earn them a chance to play against the Vegas Golden Knights. And, of course, these teams know each other from previous playoffs. Nashville against Vancouver. So again, best of 3. The first 2 games the first game would be in Nashville. How would you? Okay, so best of 3 I would think would be 1, 1, and 1. So 1 in Nashville, 1 in Vancouver, and then the other one back in Nashville. It's a lot of travel. I would think whatever they do with the playoffs, they might even go 2-3-2 from here because they're going to want to minimize travel as much as possible. But for the sake of this video, I'll say Nashville ends up with the home ice advantage of some sort. Maybe all 3 games will be in the home of the team that's the higher seed for this playoff. Maybe in order for a lower seed to make it, they have to win all 3. But I'll still take Nashville either way. So I think Nashville would beat out Vancouver. Vancouver would have played games that were important the entire season and would have had a chance at playoffs, and this would have felt like playoffs. And I think for Vancouver fans, that would be important. Now, the question then becomes, if Vancouver lost here, would that mean that they keep their first-round draft pick, or does it still go to New Jersey, who got that draft pick from Tampa? So yeah, that's the question I have when it comes to Vancouver is, if we end up with a situation like this, does that count as missing the playoffs, or does that count as made the playoffs and then they keep their draft pick? Right? So, that being said, we are now into the official first round of the playoffs. This is your wild card round. This is your first round. So we have Boston against the Rangers. I don't like this matchup for Boston. I don't. I know, Boston's been playing very, very well. They're number 2 in my power rankings. But boy howdy, would the Rangers give them a headache. Now, one thing that I think would potentially help the Bruins here is experience. And with the rest, that could help as well. That they've had that time off to heal up. This is a team that's pretty beat up. And they've admitted since the pause began that Bergeron's dealing with a lot of nagging injuries. And that this pause is helping him to get healthier. It doesn't bode well for the Rangers. The fact the Rangers are in the playoffs would be huge for the Rangers. I don't see in a 7-game series them being able to take out the Bruins. So the Rangers come out in round 1. So Boston moves on to round 2. I'll go ahead and take the Stanley Cup magnet and put it somewhere that you guys can see it. There you go. Tampa Bay against Toronto. I don't know. Toronto, you would think if Muzzin's able to be healthy by the time we get to these games, that could help. Can Toronto knock out Tampa? They've shown that they can beat Tampa. But I don't see Tampa losing in round 1 again. I don't. I don't see Tampa Bay being knocked out in the first round again. If they do, that's where you start questioning the coach. That's where you start looking at John Cooper and saying, you know what? It's been a great regular season run, but we need results in the postseason. And we don't want to have to, tear this apart until after we've won a Stanley Cup. So we're going to look in another direction, and here's Gerard Gallant. That kind of thing, right? So I can't see them losing in round 1 again. So no offense to Toronto, but I can't see them taking out Tampa Bay, although they match up very well against them. And I hate to say this as well, that could end up being a Game 7 situation again. But it would be in Tampa. So moving on to the Metro. So we go over to the Metro. You have Washington against Columbus. Washington, again, I can't see a situation where the Capitals get knocked out. And here's where it gets interesting. So people are already going to be like, oh, he's just going to pick all the home teams. Well, part of the reason why the underdogs have been so successful over the last forever, they play really important games to get into the playoffs, while the favorites are sometimes a little bit, I don't want to say lazy going into the playoffs, but they're not playing with that same intensity. Coming out of this, I think that advantage for the underdog goes away. I think the advantage goes to the favorite, to the team with home ice advantage, because now everybody's playing with the same intensity. Everybody's playing with that same sense of urgency. If there's rust because they haven't played in a while, everybody's experiencing the exact same thing. So I think in a man-for-man situation, I think Washington would take out Tampa. Or Columbus, I should say, sorry. So Washington taking out Columbus. Now, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. This is where it gets really, really tough. Philadelphia's playing really, really well. But Pittsburgh, healthy, going into a playoff series. Pittsburgh's had trouble getting healthy all year. You've got Crosby, you've got Malkin, and you've got a team that, again, when healthy, is absolutely insanely good. This break, or whatever you want to call it, has absolutely been toughest for Philadelphia. Going into it, Philadelphia are arguably the best team in the league. And arguably being 9 wins in a row before losing that game against the Boston Bruins. They've been that good. So it's tough, but I do think Pittsburgh is the one case where I see the road team being able to come out of round 1. So that takes Philadelphia out. And I apologize to Philadelphia because I really don't, I'm going to be honest, I don't want that to happen. I would not be cheering for Pittsburgh in that series. But Pittsburgh, I think there's still another run there. St. Louis and Nashville. This would be a very tough series. This would be a very, very tough one. So, St. Louis has their eyes on going back-to-back. Nashville plays better as an underdog. They do. Now, I've talked about how I think St. Louis could get knocked out in round 1. But I'm going to defer to what I just said about Washington. With the reset that we would experience, I think that helps St. Louis get focused, and it means that everybody's kind of on an even playing field. And St. Louis is just so, gosh darn it, deep that I can't see St. Louis getting knocked out in that first round by Nashville. So I'm going to put Nashville here. I move Carolina. This is where I hope I get it on one take, because if it takes multiple takes, then this is just going to be a mess. So take that off, and that off. This is going to be the side of the board where all the teams that have been knocked out of the playoffs go, and potentially pre-playoffs, if these all count as playoff appearances or not. All right, so Colorado and Dallas. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't see any way that Dallas knocks out Colorado. I don't. I just don't. And I like Dallas. Everybody knows I'm a fan of Dallas. I can't see Dallas losing to Colorado. No. Just no. I can't. No. Vegas and Winnipeg. This is where it gets tricky. Because I do think Winnipeg's been playing very well. And I do think Winnipeg has a better team than they get credit for. And there will be at least one upset in these playoffs. And I honestly think Vegas could be the one that are the victims of a very good team in Winnipeg that's very, very confident. Going into this, very confident Winnipeg team, which is also a pretty deep team as well. And so I genuinely think Winnipeg could knock out Vegas. I don't think that's a great matchup for Vegas, so I'm going to put Vegas over here. And the Battle of Alberta. I don't see how... I mean, Calgary's had a harder time with it than the Oilers have over the last little while. And I do think that the Oilers are probably the better team. So, yeah, you end up with a prairie battle in round 2 right there. But most of the Canadian teams at that point are out. So, for Rogers, who paid a lot of money for the rights to broadcasting the NHL in Canada, again, it looks like it's going to be a tough year for them financially, because I'd have Toronto out in round 1, Vancouver out in the preliminary round, whatever you want to call it. Calgary's out in round 1 because it's a Battle of Alberta. That Battle of Alberta, though, would be fantastic. Am I right? Okay, so round 2. Boston against Tampa. This is a bad matchup for Boston. I've watched Tampa play Boston this year. I don't like it for Boston. I really think that the Tampa Bay Lightning would knock out the Boston Bruins in round 2. So for people who are saying Shannon's biased in favor of, notice every team that I cheer for is now out of the playoffs. They're all gone. So that being said, we're going to take a look at what else is going to happen. Washington against Pittsburgh, because it's what the hockey gods want. It wants Pittsburgh, Washington, Pittsburgh. So with that in mind, Ovechkin wanting that second Stanley Cup, Crosby wanting a 4th. This would be an intense playoff. It really comes down to Holtby and probably Murray. Now, I know there's going to be Pittsburgh fans saying it'll be Jarry, but I got a funny feeling with the way Sullivan was deploying his goaltenders. Murray's going to have his chance here. And if they get out of round 1 with Matt Murray as the goaltender, then he'll be in there for round 2. And Holtby, I think, is the de facto starter for Washington. Although, again, you're in a situation where the youngsters kind of outplayed the veteran for large portions of the season. I like Washington's depth. Now, I like Pittsburgh's too. So these two teams are both capable of going on a nice long run. They were both cold going into this break, but I kind of like Washington's chances. So I'll put Washington against Tampa, a rematch of the Stanley Cup conference final from 2018. So again, no really creative thing for many out there. St. Louis and Colorado. So Colorado was my pick to make it to the Stanley Cup final before the season started. St. Louis has had a really, really strong run. Now, my power rankings, I get criticized for having Colorado ahead of St. Louis. I still have had Colorado ahead of St. Louis because they've been able to win without their players. And I know St. Louis did it at points this year as well. St. Louis then went through that large struggle before they went on that winning streak. To me, it kind of one's a wash for the other. This is really tough to call. St. Louis having home ice, Colorado on the road. It is hard for me to change my prediction. I'm going to be honest. You got to think if Nathan McKinnon is able to go, if Rantanen's healthy, if Makar plays the way that we know he can. I don't think Makar was 100% healthy even when he was playing over the last little while since coming back from his last injury. I think that's where St. Louis gets knocked out. It is extremely difficult to win to win two Stanley Cups in a row. To win back-to-back is very, very difficult. It's only happened once since the Detroit Red Wings did it in the 90s, and that was Pittsburgh in 2016-2017. So the idea that we'd have a new Stanley Cup champion, it's not a revolutionary one. It's highly likely. So Edmonton and Winnipeg, and I'm going to switch this because it makes it look like the Winnipeg would have home ice and they wouldn't. Edmonton would. This is a fascinating series right here. I favor Winnipeg because of the depth issue. Because again, once you get into the second round, you're going to be dealing with some injuries here and there, and Winnipeg has had many times dealing with injuries. On the defensive side, I kind of actually like Edmonton a little bit defensively. Their defense gets ridiculed a lot, but honestly, it's a pretty good blue line they have back there. Goaltending, I give an edge to Winnipeg. I think Hellebuck can take Winnipeg on a run, and so I have Winnipeg as a Cinderella team knocking out the Edmonton Oilers. So there's your final four. I don't know. So the question would be, who would Shannon be cheering for in that situation? Probably Winnipeg. This is where I'd kind of be like, you know what, it'd be nice if a Canadian team won it. It's my wife's favorite team, so sure, I'd probably be cheering for Winnipeg, which means they're doomed. So Tampa Bay against Washington. This would be a tough one. Really, really tough series. Tampa Bay has been playing really, really well. And again, I think after what happened last year with getting knocked out in round one, there's got to be some motivation for this team that no matter how long we're off on a break, that when these guys come back, they're like, all right, we've got to do this. We have to do this. I think Tampa Bay would take out Washington. So I've officially changed my prediction. I have Washington going out in the conference final to Tampa Bay. The rematch of the conference final from 2 years ago. And this time I'm saying Tampa will take it, which is tricky because a lot of people have been burned recently for picking Tampa to win anything. Kind of a way to get burned regularly. But I still think they're a pretty darn good team. And eventually, the teams that get ridiculed for not being good enough usually will break through. I'm talking about the Oilers in the 80s, the Red Wings in the 90s. The Islanders, the early 80s, they came out of the late 70s where people were like, I don't know if these guys are going to win anything. And then all of a sudden, dynasty. Colorado. The Colorado Avalanche against the Winnipeg Jets. This would be a fantastic series. This could be a really high-scoring series, too. I still think Colorado, to me, looks like potentially a team that can go on a really nice run. And again, Francouz, I think, is good enough to take him there. I think Grubauer can get him there potentially as well. Grubauer had a really good playoff last year. And he's shown he can be an excellent starting goaltender. Winnipeg, again, Connor Hellebuck might be one of the Vezina winners, or Vezina favorites right now. And so for that reason, it's hard to go against Winnipeg. This is a tough one. Uh, relying on a healthy Nathan McKinnon, I'll say Colorado. I'll say Colorado, so we would have Tampa Bay against Colorado, a Stanley Cup final we've never seen before. So, who would win the Stanley Cup? Would it go to Tampa or would it go to Colorado? I'll put the magnet down here. We'll discuss. Tampa Bay, again, a lot of this depends on, Stamkos has to be healthy and Hedman has to be healthy. And again, with everything that's going on right now, it makes it easier to say, yeah, they'll be ready to go for the playoffs. So against the Colorado Avalanche, who would have the favorite tag, that would be Tampa. Colorado's gone through so many injuries, and that can sometimes be kind of an inspirational thing for a team where they all rally around it. And I'm I'm gonna hate myself for this, but I'll take Tampa Bay. I'll take Tampa Bay because again, I know this is a team that has failed time and time and time again. I do not expect that going into the playoffs, many people at all would be taking Tampa Bay if the playoffs started right now. I think you'd see a lot of people taking Boston. Boston's a sexy pick. You'd see a lot of people taking Philly. If you're looking out west, Vegas would get a lot of preferential treatment. St. Louis for the back-to-back, yes. Perfect situation where Tampa doesn't really have that pressure. Tampa Bay wouldn't really have that to deal with. They would just be seen as, well, they're probably not going to be good enough. They're probably going to be out in the second round. Boston will knock them out. And that might be perfect for them. Because then it can't go to their heads, right? I don't know that it necessarily did last year, but it sure looked like it did. First period against Columbus, great. Third period of Game 4 against Columbus, they were really, really good. Everything in between, they didn't look very interested. They weren't fighting very hard. Their coach didn't seem to be very interested. And I said at the time, it looked like halfway through Game 4, he went, holy crap, we could be out. What's going on here? And then they turned it on, but it was too late. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. And again, this is just an idea for how they could do playoffs if it started tomorrow. And I'm not going to go into the whole winning percentage and all that. That's up to everybody else. Because then you get into too much of the minutia, and it doesn't necessarily change who would win in the end. I don't know that it matters how all of this will be factored in. I think Tampa Bay is probably the best team in the league. They weren't playing like it going in to the pause, as we're calling it. And I say we because that's what the NHL's called it too, that they're pausing the season. But I still think on paper they're the best team. I think with Vasilevsky in net, with guys like Stamkos, Kucherov, and the whole gang up front, guys like Cirelli, Palat, Gord, there's a lot of depth there up front and on the blue line. It's a really deep blue line when it's healthy. So as long as Hedman's healthy, McDonough's fine, everybody else is healthy, and with the emergence of Sergachev, this could be your 2020 Stanley Cup champ. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.